Right then, welcome to Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth. This will be my relaxed review because, as most people will be aware, this is where the series seriously dipped in quality before it kind of peaked again in the fourth installment of the franchise, and then it kind of went all downhill from there. So Hellraiser 3, Hell on Earth is very much, without a shadow of a doubt, a 90s film. And most people that would have seen it will be fully aware of this. It is 90s through and through. A lot of people give the first two movies some flack for questionable acting and lines and fudged up plots here and there and poor character decisions and all that kind of such. However, Hell on Earth is absolutely riddled with it. Now, I will just say from the outset that this is actually a movie which I do enjoy for what it is. It's not a movie which I hate. It's not a movie I have seen a lot, but I have watched it repeatedly a few times. However, like I say, this is really where the series dipped in quality. There was a crossover in studios. Doug Bradley was still Pinhead at this point. Most people will know Doug Bradley stayed as Pinhead right up until the ninth installment of the franchise, I believe. And Clive Barker was still involved, kind of. He was a producer on the movie, which is probably the only reason why it got, pushed into production. The story is very kind of convoluted. So for those that aren't aware, the idea was actually going to be that Julia became the main villain of the franchise. Of course, she was in, 1 and 2. And at the end of the second movie, spoilers, Pinhead gets destroyed, killed. And it is quite a final death for the iconic Cenobites. However, the only thing that can be kind of gathered from his resurrection in this movie, in the third installment, is the fact that they wanted to use him as a marketing tool because he is iconic, he does push the franchise, and he essentially became the face of the franchise from then on. So Clive Barker had absolutely nothing to do with the story, as far as can be told. And from here, this is kind of where Clive Barker started to really distance himself from all of the projects. And you can definitely see why if you have ever seen this film. Now, it's called Hell on Earth. It's really not Hell on Earth. It is Hell in New York. And that is essentially it. We have our two main characters. We have our reporter, Joanne. We have her sort of tearaway friend, becomes friend anyway, Terry. And we also get a very small cameo from Kirsty Cotton. So the premise is that Joanne is essentially a reporter. She's not a very good one. She is on a report, believe it or not, in an emergency room, a hospital, and she's such a bad reporter that she even states that there is absolutely nothing to report here. And lo and behold, she's baffled when, you're in an emergency room and, oh my god, there's an emergency. God forbid that would ever happen in real life, an emergency in an emergency room scenario. Jesus. So the emergency happens. This is where we kind of start to get our supernatural Cenobite element to the movie. We didn't really see too much prior to that. We just saw the introduction to the Pillar of Souls, where Pinhead, our resurrected Cenobite, will come out of. Now, the supernatural element is a guy rushed into the emergency room with chains. They tear him apart and he's dead. Bang. That's essentially it. Now, Terry, this is where the introduction to Terry happens. And again, there's some really bad acting here. Paula Marshall is the lady that plays Terry. And it's Terry Farrell, I know, coincidence, that plays Joanne. Both of their acting is massively questionable. Paula especially, it is a 90s movie through and through, but her acting is just bad. So this is where our two main characters get introduced to one another, and we find out where the Cenobite leader is in the boiler room. Now this is obviously where the incident occurred. As I said, this is not a very good movie. Like I say, it's not extremely bad, but it is a 90s movie through and through. And I know I've said that a few times now, but if you've seen it, you'll really know what I mean. The 90s is where a lot of films and franchises, and this is prevalent with comics as well, for those that read comics, where people chose to really ramp up and kind of rockify and make things more hardcore in terms of the franchise. Basically, they try to get things more rad in most franchises, and unfortunately Hellraiser suffered from that as well. We get an introduction of pseudo-Cenobites. Like I say, Pinhead is not really the Pinhead we know, but there is kind of an in-story reason for that. But yeah, there's a lot of these elements which, like I say, is very 90s, and it's just, like I say, bad. It's not very good at all. Pinhead, like I say, does have an in-universe reason for being quite different. This is where we learn a little bit more about Pinhead, where we get introduced to these elements in the second film. And this is quite a good expansion to the mythos. We learn that Pinhead was Elliot Spencer, and now for some reason, for whatever reason, because Pinhead's dead, and because he learned of his former self before he died, he is now split, basically. You've got Elliot Spencer, and then you've got the Pinhead version. Pinhead is the Hell Priest, and is somehow running rampant on Earth, unbound, and is just going to cause absolute havoc and bring hell to Earth, essentially. Elliot Spencer speaks to Joey or Joanne through dreams, and this is apparently his realm. It doesn't really make that much sense, because in the original 1 and 2, there's obviously, dimensions and things like that, but there's not really a reason for a dimension with Elliot Spencer at all, to be perfectly honest, but whatever, it is what it is. So he speaks to Joey, warns Joey, and the movie just chugs along nicely, kind of. There's a lot of death involved. Pinhead only comes back because the nightclub owner that bought him, or was given to him basically, in the Pillar of Souls, starts bringing bodies to him. It's a very reminiscent to the first and second movie, where the bodies need to be kind of harvested, the blood, etc, etc. But again, it's a hugely convoluted way to force Pinhead back into the franchise. It does kind of make sense, and I've even done a video on the Pillar of Souls kind of explaining the reasons of how it kind of happened, but again, it is convoluted. Disregarding all the reasons I gave, it still is a very convoluted movie. So it chugs along nicely. We get pseudo Cenobites, which kind of break the law in universe because they remember their former selves, and again, they are plagued with the 90s rad culture. Their designs are very, very bad. You have one with a camera in his face. You get the nightclub owner with a piston in his head. And again, they all remember who they were. You get one which is a cocktail maker and, shakes cocktail drinks and then spits fire and flames. And then there's another one which was a DJ and has discs in his head, CDs, and throws razor sharp CDs at people. This is really, really where the franchise took a massive dip. They went well away from the dark, mysterious, sadomasochistic element to the Cenobites, and really, butchered them, if, kind of the pun, I guess, intended there. And it is a massive shame. In my eyes, this movie is bad. I will still watch it here and there, but on a whole, it is a very bad film. The acting's bad. Believe it or not, this is one of the few Hellraiser films which do not document their production budget online, essentially anywhere. It's very difficult to find. I've still not managed to find it. But it did take a 12.5 million at the box office, which I guess isn't that bad. It still managed to secure the 4th entry to the franchise, which, again, I will do a review on that, but it kind of picked up a little bit from there. So, as I say, it's not a massively great film, but it does introduce some absolutely superb scenes with Pinhead. And again, just nails him down, pun intended, as one of the most quotable villains of all time. There's a scene in the church, which I'm surprised they allowed to make it. I'm fairly certain if you put something like that out today, it wouldn't get past the pitch because of religious connotations and such. But there's a scene in a church where he pulls his pins out of his head, puts them in each of his hands, holds his hands out and goes, I am the way, and everything blows up, and it's extreme, and it's a fantastic scene. However, aside from that, it's not a fantastic film, even remotely. I am shitting on it a lot in this review, but it's not that bad. It's worth a watch if you're going to watch the first 4 movies, and if you are into Hellraiser, then obviously watch it maybe after drinking a few beers, because you're probably going to need them to enjoy it. So that being said, this is my very super ultra relaxed review of Hellraiser 3 Hell on Earth. If you did enjoy it, give it a big thumbs up. Click that subscribe button for more reviews in the future. Normally I do these scripted with a lot of research. However, I do throw in these relaxed movie reviews from time to time. as and when the film essentially kind of deserves it. So yeah, give it a big thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Hit that subscribe button for more in the future. And as always, I have been Mr. H, and I will catch you in the comment section.